Make sure you do in the cloud. Did you do in the cloud?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. All right, I'm gonna let people in.
Great. Hey, everyone, welcome. You all join with your audio. Give it one more minute. So welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this event, Exploring Careers in Clean Energy. My name is Alicia Harrington, and I am a Deputy Director with Browning the Green Space. We are a nonprofit coalition of leaders working to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion in the clean energy and climate tech sector. Our Executive Director, Founder, and President, Kerry Bowie, will go into more detail about who we are and the work that we do in a few moments. As folks are joining the event, please utilize the chat. If you could introduce yourself, tell us your name, where you are joining us from, your school or organization, if applicable. And then please use the chat during the event. So if you have questions that come up, please put them in the chat and our speakers will try to answer them during the Q&A portion of the event. And now just a quick overview of the agenda. Also for your reference, this event will be recorded and we'll be sharing out the recording after the event. So the agenda today is quick introduction right now, then we'll move on to our speaker portion of the event, then we'll go into a panel discussion, Q&A, and then we'll wrap up. I'll share an interest form for folks who want to kind of tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're interested in this sector, and we'll see if we can connect you to opportunities, whether they be additional events or, jobs, internships, whatever, we know that's coming on board, we can share that out as well. And there's a place on the form to sign up for our newsletter if you want to be notified of what's going on with BGS and upcoming events and programming. So at this point, I will turn it over to Kerry, and we will get started with the speaker portion of the event. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, Alicia, for that. And I don't see anybody putting stuff into the chat, so I went ahead and dropped. So I'm Kerry Bowie. I'm in Boston, and I'm with Browning the Green Space. So we love to see who you are too, if you're willing to share in the chat. And so my background is originally from Alabama, a fence line community, background in engineering, and worked for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts here. And so really this organization grew out of work I did in the environmental justice space, recognizing that there are a lot of environmental bads that Black and Latinx and Indigenous people run into, but really wanted to make sure that the environmental goods, the clean energy jobs, the renewable energy jobs, that our communities weren't missing out on those. So next slide. So we're really at the intersection of the racial wealth gap and climate change is where we're focused. And you can see there are problems across a number of different areas. So in terms of careers, creating pathways to employment, companies, removing barriers to employment, capital. We see that most funding is going to white men, with less than 3% of that going to Black and Latinx founders in the venture capital space. And it's not that much better in the contract space. So we think about, municipal and government, municipal and state and federal government contracts. And so we're trying to work on that as well as with large corporations and supplier diversity, and then communities. Sort of last but not least, and probably most importantly, we see that some of our communities, we're paying a lot more, as a percentage of our income for energy. So next slide. So our vision is a just energy transition, and our mission is threefold. We want to create jobs, build wealth, and reduce energy burden. Next slide. And we focus on, our values, which, on the left-hand side, community first and climate justice. We really want to make sure that we're focusing on the people in our most vulnerable communities. And we see climate justice as, it's a path: diversity, then inclusion, then equity, and then you get to justice. And we're really trying to bring people together across, on the right-hand side, thinking about, leading with trust and transparency and collaboration. Next slide. I'm an engineer by training, so I believe in, system dynamics, and we think we need to be doing all these things at the same time. So in parallel, and there are some overlaps. So I see us as, while we're an environmental justice organization at our heart, we're really focused on economic justice and social justice, and those things tie together. And so, creating jobs, building wealth, and reducing energy burden all work together at the same time. Next slide. We're based in Boston, and also sort of expanding across Massachusetts and gateway cities. Gateway cities in the Massachusetts area are those that have historically had disinvestment. They tend to trend with environmental justice communities that have larger minority populations, lower income, and oftentimes larger populations with English isolation. And so we're focused on those. So we've grown out from Massachusetts, starting to look more across New England and New York. But we think there's an opportunity to do this at a national scale. But we want to crawl before we walk and walk before we run. But we know that a number of you, as we see in the chat, are from places outside of New England. So happy to have you here. Next slide. So I already walked through this in terms of, those problem areas. So this is what we're doing. And this session that we're doing today is going to be more focused on that first area, really around careers. But like I said, there are linkages, careers, you got to have a place for people to land. And then, for some of those small businesses, as we look at capital and contracts, if we can grow more small businesses of color, that helps. And then lastly, we want to see more, especially Black and brown people working in these companies, small companies or large corporations, and giving back to their communities. Next slide. And this just shows a handful of our initiatives that we have, going on. And so in the career space, we're doing a lot of work around workforce equity and training. We're looking at doing some scholarships for people getting into the space. One of the things that we're trying to do is not necessarily do the work that others are doing. So if there are already existing training programs in the space, we just want to support by pushing people into those programs and pulling them out on the other side with internships and apprenticeships and sort of pre-grad or post-graduation programs. And then on the companies piece, when we think about our pledge, one of the things we want is, if you train folk, but you put them into hostile environments, that doesn't work either. So we're trying to work with companies to make sure that they're dealing with their own unconscious bias and, looking at DEI training and things of that nature. And then on the capital and contract space, we actually have, a couple of accelerators, one that we're doing with startups and one that we're doing with small businesses. And lastly, we've got some community programs. We're working with the Mass Save program here in Massachusetts, which includes some of the large investor-owned utilities like the National Grids and Eversources and others. And we recently have a program with Lawrence with the Department of Energy. It's a community LEAP program where we're really just trying to support them, looking at decarbonization and electrification and mobility. So next slide. I won't go through all of these. I talked about these a little bit because I want to make sure we get to our speakers, but I mentioned the Clean Energy DEI intern program, and actually Tamika, who's with us, when I introduce her, I'll talk a little bit more about this program when I do a quick intro. Next slide. Prospects, this is in the wind space. And so we're partnering with the Exodus group out of Aberdeen, Scotland. And we think this is when we talk about partnering. They know wind in the space. We know the sort of DEI ecosystem here in Massachusetts. So we partnered to go, how can we get more people into the wind space, and working with people like, where Tamika is Avangrid, but also, Vineyard Wind and Mayflower and others. How can we work to make sure people are getting into those spaces? Next slide. And then I talked about the scholarship fund, so getting people into programs, but also making sure that they have money to do it, and not just traditional scholarships, but what about for training, or, we talk about training and tuition, but what about some of those other things, transportation, childcare, and things of that sort. So next slide. And then lastly, I think this is the last slide on my end, is how do we connect people? How do we make sure that job seekers and employers can find each other? Because there are a lot of job boards out there. It's hard to navigate. And so we're looking to launch in the spring a platform where we can sort of bring people together, or connect to some already existing platforms, so it's easier to do this. So next slide. All right, so I'm gonna hand off. I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna moderate a panel with Dr. Tamika Jacques and Omar Blayton. But before we turn over to them, I just wanted to give a quick sort of how I know them. So Tamika used to work at the Massachusetts Clean Energy Council when I was at the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection. And one of the things we talked about was the Clean Energy Summer Internship Program. I have a couple MIT degrees, and I remember saying, hey, I would love to, it not to be all young white guys, that we're pulling into the program. Took a little while, but we made that happen. And so happy to have Dr. Tamika Jacques here. And then Omar Blayton. My wife is a physician scientist at the Massachusetts General Hospital. So I actually was introduced to Omar through his wife, who's also a physician. And so it was great to know we had some mutual interests in the clean energy space. So he's going to talk about some of the work that they're doing at Sunwealth. And the reason we have them here is the jobs for, in the offshore wind space and in solar installation are huge. And this panel is about careers in clean energy. So these are two great places to start. So with that, I think we can pull down these slides, and we will turn it over to Tamika.
Yes, thank you. Hopefully you can see my screen. So give me 1 second just to bring it up. Slideshow, it's usually here. Yikes. See, I'm not a Zoom user. That's what happens, right?
If you go to the lower.
Oh, here we go. Got it. I knew it was somewhere. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon. I actually was looking in the chat and I see there is so many participants on here. It looks like from all over the country. I don't want to just name one state in particular, but it's great to see that, that there is many participants here. Thank you to Browning the Green Space. Thank you to Kerry for the introduction. It's always great to work with our partners. And as Kerry said, my name is Tamika Jacques, and I am currently the Director of Workforce Development and Supply Chain at Avangrid, which is based in Boston. We are an offshore wind company. We have many companies, actually. We are also a utility company as well, depending on which state you live in. But for me, I am specifically working on offshore wind, which means that I specifically work on two projects. One here, Commonwealth Wind, which is based out of New Bedford, and then also Park City Wind, which is based in Bridgeport, Connecticut, all which you're going to see. I'm going to explain a little bit. Located about 20 miles from Martha's Vineyard in Massachusetts. As Kerry said, I used to work at the Massachusetts Clean Energy Center. I was there for 10 years, so I've only been at Avangrid for 6 months. And just a little bit of overview, because I know that there are many students, on this workshop this afternoon. No one starts out, maybe nowadays, younger students can say, I want to get involved in sustainability and clean energy, but I have to say, no one was speaking about this when I was growing up, and being a Black woman, no one I knew was in this space. So it is great to see the work that Browning the Green Space does, because, this is not just, as Kerry said, there's a lot of white males that have, that are part of this industry. And it's great to see the work that Browning the Green Space is doing, as, we do strive for equality. So how I came into clean energy, not just offshore wind, this is how long I've been in this space. In 2008, under Obama, the economy tanked a little bit, maybe more than a little bit. And so there was some ARA funding. And out of that federal funding, there was $5 million that was given to Massachusetts to work in the clean energy space. And so at that time, I was working for the Secretary of Labor and Workforce Development, and she was like, we have this money, what are we going to do with it? And so we worked with our quasi at that time, Commonwealth Corporation, and we really just worked on weatherization at that time. Solar was, coming up, but weatherization was the main key. And so the Massachusetts Clean Energy Center, we worked with them closely, and then from working on a small portion of federal funding, I went to the Massachusetts Clean Energy Center, and I got to work on many sectors. So now I wasn't just talking weatherization, I was talking about solar, I was talking about offshore wind, I was talking about battery storage. I mean, the list just goes on and on. And so this is a fascinating industry. And so if you're on this call, I hope that as you listen to us speak, that we'll be able to tap your interest. And I say, get in where you fit in, because you're going to see, no matter what your major in or your interest, there is a space here for you, and there is room for you. And I would say, the resources that Browning the Green Space offers, participate, in those feature workshops, look at their website, because I think they offer so many great resources so that you can pick where you want to fit in, right? We want to make sure that we know that there's space for you. So if you're still kind of like, I'm not sure, hopefully after today, you'll say, I want to do this. I want an internship. I want to be involved some way, right? So that's just a little bit my background, because we only have 7 minutes. So please, Alicia, send me a message. Someone just wave and be like, you've talked too much, because I can't do that. Okay. All right. So Avangrid, let me just give you a quick overview of who we are. I talked about, we have projects. I am specifically on Park City Wind and Commonwealth Wind, but as Kerry mentioned, Vineyard Wind, we have 50% ownership in that project. And Vineyard Wind is currently being developed right now. It'll be the first one in the United States of this size, because we do have Block Island. We must acknowledge Block Island and Rhode Island. But as far as a big size in Massachusetts, as far as offshore wind, Vineyard Wind will be first, and then Park City Wind and Commonwealth Wind will be built together. So if you see from this graphic that I have here, you'll see that these are the different lease areas, again, located off Martha's Vineyard. And even though the project is based out of Park City Wind is based out of Bridgeport, it just means that the offshore wind turbines will be located in Massachusetts, but Connecticut is buying the energy. And then for Commonwealth Wind, Massachusetts is buying the energy. So it does get a little bit tricky, but again, happy to answer questions later on. And so a lot of people say, well, where's the cables going? Well, the cables are coming from a town called Barnstable in Massachusetts, and that's where all and then the substations will come through New Bedford. So these are pretty big projects. And just to so the reason why we are here today, as Kerry said, we are talking about careers, and I have 2 slides that are dedicated to careers. And as you will see here, the top is skilled labor. One of my main parts of my job is to negotiate a project labor agreement. And if you don't know what that is on this call, that is when we are contracting with the unions to build these great projects, right? And so part of the skilled labor, when we talk about the on and the offshore, as far as my job, is really working with electricians, plumbers, pipe fitters, engineers. And so part of that also is working with fisheries. If anyone has gone to the aquarium, yes, we partner with both aquariums, the one in Connecticut, Mystic, as well as the aquarium in Massachusetts, because we want to protect our environment. Just because we're building this offshore wind facility, we really have to be careful of the blue whales that are out there. I'm sorry, the right whale that are out there. And so, as you can see, the jobs that people know about in this industry is civil engineering, research and development, geology, environmental planning, environmental mitigation, and then in the marine trades. But what you may not see, and as someone that is on this call, we need communications. We got to communicate what we're doing, right? We need lawyers to look through all these contracts. My project labor agreement, I'm on the phone with lawyers all the time. Health and safety. We can't just have people on boats for weeks at a time and them not understand what it takes to be out there, right? And so also government, part of those negotiations and what we call the power purchase agreements is with our states. And so we work with government very closely. Project managers, those that are in business school and you're looking for that PMP certification, and also advanced manufacturing. And so I had also designated one more slide because it's easy to see all these job descriptions in front of you. But when we think of this, we really think of an offshore wind, it's really by phase, right, for us. So we have the development phase, which what we are in right now for Park City Wind and Commonwealth Wind. We have the construction phase and we have the operation phase. And so you can see the type of jobs that are on here. What you may not see on here is that we still need caterers, because our workers are going to be on boats for 2-3 weeks at a time. There's different shifts. So we need people that own catering company. We need manufacturer, people that make, bolts and nuts. There's so many different types of jobs that are part of offshore wind that literally, we need accountants. We have to budget these big dollars, right? We need cost control. Are we inside budget? Are we outside budget? So we need people that tell us these type of things. So I just wanted to give you some of the jobs, the things that are happening in offshore wind. I want to say that, primarily I work with the construction workers, but because we are in this development phase, you can see that we partner with Browning the Green Space. Avangrid has partnered with Browning the Green Space to offer scholarships for anyone that wants to study in this field. We partner with, as you can see here, project management. We need planners. How do we execute these big projects that we're going to build? So essentially, no matter what you are studying, let me just say that there is a position for you in offshore wind. And if you are Massachusetts Clean Energy Center, they have this great website that tells you all about construction and installation, the different job types that are there as far as skilled labor. So I just want to encourage you to go on masscec.com, and it will really give you a listing of, if the type of jobs that are there and the different career paths, how do you become an apprentice and kind of move up to journeyman, and the different career sets that are available there. So I thought it was important that I share this resource to you, because it really will give you some foundation of where you need to be. I'm only speaking for a few minutes today, but I know Kerry's going to open up the panel, so I don't want to take up too much of time, but I do want to say that if you look here in Connecticut, for those of you that are like, I'm into the whole research piece. I'm into the whole fisheries. I love animals. Well, guess what? Guess who will be on that boat? We will need people to look for the whales. We will need people to see how the fish are acting. We will need people to go out and really work that ocean to make sure that we are not only are we generating energy, but we are protecting our whole environment. So hopefully I have piqued your interest a little bit, and then I can answer some questions when Kerry opens up the panel.
Great, thank you, Tamika. And if you pull down your slides, we'll get Omar up.
Yes, stop share. There you go.
How you doing, everyone? I'm Omar Blayton. I'm the CFO of Sunwealth Power. I have some slides I want to share too. I just need to. And just apology in advance. I'm actually on parental leave, and I have a 7-week-old in the background, so I might have to go back and tend to him if I hear him kind of clucking now. All right.
Don't apologize for your children.
Yeah. Trying to share. Oh, it says host only can share. Right. I'm listening to the host share screen. Okay, here. Sorry. All right, got it. All right. Can everyone see my screen? All right. Yep. So this is in a nutshell, this is Sunwealth. We were founded in 2014. We're kind of a fund/developer of solar projects. So we have about 35 people and like $100 million, a little bit over in assets. We're in 16 states in the District of Columbia, and we focus solely on kind of small commercial scale solar. So what does that mean? That means things lower than a megawatt typically, and then we can go pretty small. And it's the area of the market that's traditionally overlooked by institutional capital. And because of that, it's in communities that are traditionally overlooked by institutional capital. So, types of businesses like not-for-profits, small businesses, educational schools, houses of worship, but in communities that are typically disadvantaged. And our thesis has always been that we can create, an investable product that's not riskier than any other, but still, democratizing who gets the benefits of solar. So Black and brown communities, low and moderate income homeowners, people that otherwise would not have, access to these projects. So we have about over like 500 projects now. Like I said, we're in 16 states. Go to the next slide. Yeah. One thing I wanted to bring up, so our impact slide here, the main thing to bring up here is that, we have kind of 82 development partners. And so the way we operate is we don't build the projects ourselves. We tend to partner with a local partner in the community and then build it with them. What the point of it as having 82 of these is showing kind of the scale versus wind, whereas wind is like a huge project. Solar is much more distributed, a lot smaller. So you're not going to have, hundreds of people working for us. Like you said, we only have 35 people, but in working with 82 other businesses, these are all separate companies with, dozens of people themselves. And so that's kind of your entree into solar. You can either go to like a fund that, focuses kind of more nationally like we do, or you could go to kind of a local installer. And, when you're talking about jobs that are available, it's almost the exact same list as what Tamika put up, except for, there are no helicopter operators or port, facilitators, because there's no water involved with solar. But, other than that, the construction aspect, kind of coming on from a journeyman, getting your certification there. We always need finance people for project finance structuring. So MBAs, people, with degrees in accounting and finance are always helpful. The biggest, most important job tends to be the project developer. And that background, when we're hiring and when most companies hire, that background can come from anywhere. It's just more of a mindset and kind of, half salesman, half like problem solver, just very persistent. So, we intentionally try to draw from a diverse, group and bring people in younger in order to train them up with the skills they need. Because what happens in this space, particularly with minorities, is that there aren't really a lot of senior minorities in this space. If you want to hire kind of a senior product developer, the likelihood of you getting, especially like a Black and brown person, is just, it's not zero, but it's small. And the reason is because the pipeline hasn't been built up. And so if you're looking for someone with like 5-10 years of experience, there are not that many people out there. So you have to kind of get people that are early on in their career and give them that experience. So then, 5 years from now, there are going to be a bunch of people out there. So that's kind of the approach we're taking and what we're trying to help facilitate and kind of incubating different groups in order to provide that experience. I'm gonna go through pretty quickly and see if there's anything else. And so some of the projects we've worked on, like I said, houses of worship. This is a church we've worked on. A high school in California we've worked on. The high school, a farm. Another thing we've done is housing, affordable low-income housing, and so like housing projects, particularly in New York. So with Housing Authority, NYCHA, and one project we did was on Queensbridge houses in Queens, where we built a project. We gave the Housing Authority lease payments to help with their facilities. We gave the low-income tenants savings on their bill, but we also had a jobs training program where we had an apprenticeship. We took people from the community and we gave them internships building these solar projects. And then some of those people got taken on full time, getting paid prevailing wage. And they went from making like no money to making $15 on an internship an hour to making $65 an hour within the span of 18 months or so. So I mean, those are the types of things we want to do and we keep, we want to facilitate. So I look forward to kind of the panel discussion.
Great, thank you, Omar. So the Queensbridge project, that's where Nas is, right? Or where you?
Yeah, that's where Nas is from.
Did you get to meet Nas working on this project?
No, let's see. There was chatter when we were about to going to commission the project that would try to get Nas there, but we wound up running into COVID, so nobody was around. Everything was remote.
All right, maybe we'll figure that out. So
yeah.
If you bring down your slides, what we'll do is I'll ask a few questions, but we'll bring up Tamika. We'll spotlight the three of us. I'll ask a few questions, but really this is really just to prime the pump for you all to ask your questions. Drop them in the chat, and we will do that. And Alicia, I know you need 5 minutes at the end, so I'll do a few questions and we'll go from there. So first, I know we just jumped in and I hadn't seen both of you in a while. So just first question I always like to ask people is, how are you doing? So maybe I'll start with you, Tamika. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I think that this year, 2022 for me has been an adjustment year because as I said that after being with a company for 10 years and then coming over to a new company where, I've done workforce development for so long and now having to negotiate a project labor agreement. It's not that I have not worked with the labor trades before, but it is a lot different when you are negotiating a contract in 2 different states with 2 different labor trades. So it's definitely been interesting to, have that labor piece. And for me, it's been a huge learning curve, to be honest with you, because I've never really done contract negotiations before. So for me, I'm doing good, but I'm also in a I'm in a season of a huge learning curve. So good, but also kind of jittery and nervous at the same time.
Well, congratulations. That's a good place to be. You don't want to, when you know it so well that you're not feeling a little pushed and challenged, it can get a little bit stale. Omar, how you doing? I mean, you got a 7-month-old at home. So
No, 7 weeks.
7 weeks. Oh,
yeah, 7 weeks.
That's even.
Yeah. So, still on parental leave. It's good. Tired. It's the second one. So, that plus a toddler. It's people don't really tell you like 2 isn't just an extra one. But it's good so far. We're gearing up. The company's gearing up for the end of the year. It's always hectic, in solar, getting projects on placed in service before the end of the year for credit reasons. So.
Okay, cool. So like I said, I'm just going to ask a few questions, and then Alicia just ping me. And we'll make sure we transition over, or we'll pick up questions as they come into the chat. So you don't have to wait for us to finish. If you got questions, just ping us, and we'll try to answer, because this is really for you all. I know Omar and Tamika, and I know a lot of this stuff, so this is really for you all. So let's just talk about going back to the careers, like how do you get into this space? Like, how do you think about that? Tamika, this is really a nascent, if you talk about offshore wind, this is like brand new, like here in the US. So how would you, advise someone if they're trying to get in this space, like what should they do?
Sure. Well, I can speak for Avangrid. We do have a program for interns. So I would say to go on Avangrid website, and you should be able to see, we do offer internships, as well as for recent graduates as well. We have a global graduate program, which means that you come into the company and you rotate. Like, so for like 4 months, you're with one department, then another 4 months, you're with another department. So we do have a rotation like that. And then just to go back to where I used to work, Mass CEC, because I still work with them very closely, is that if you live in Massachusetts, or you attend a Massachusetts college, you are eligible for an internship through Mass CEC, and you can put your resume in, or you can call a company in Massachusetts and say, hey, I want to come work for your company, right? And Mass CEC will reimburse companies to have you. So, it depends on what sector you're trying to get in. But for offshore wind, I can say that Mayflower Wind is another company, Vineyard Wind is another company, along with Avangrid. So there are many companies that are located in Massachusetts, or depending, where you are. And I will also say that, sign up in Google, just do the basic, if you put in offshore wind, so you can get the alerts that happen. Many of you know there is a bid this week that is happening out of California. So, and a few weeks ago, Rhode Island just issued a bid for offshore wind as well. So I would just say, in student terms, sign up for your Google alerts, get them in your email so you can see what's coming. And when you see the companies, go on the company website, see if they offer internships, look at professional development. If this is an industry you're interested in, look at who's the professional development. ACP was just in Rhode Island a few weeks ago, especially for the women that are on this call. We have the Women in Energy in Boston. And they're just in their other chapters all across the country, the New England Women in Energy Environment. And then, we also have the American Association of Blacks in Energy. So if this is something that you want to get into, I would say look at the company's websites, and then network with individuals to see what you have open at your company. I think all of us, if you emailed anyone, would point you in the right direction, right? If you're interested. So those are the first things that I always, if you're a student, look for an internship. That's the first thing. And then if you're a recent graduate, look on the company website and see what they offer for recent graduates.
Yeah, and this is, we're here in Boston and Massachusetts, so this is, we're giving Massachusetts examples, but all the things that Tamika just shared, figure out where you are in your state or your region or your municipality. They're going to be similar programs, and if you get stuck, feel free to reach out to us and we'll see if we can help. But I know, Tamika just talked about California. There's a empowering diversity and clean tech program called Edict. My friend Devin started that out in California. It got picked up by Elemental Accelerator, so they've got a program there. I'm sure there are others across the country, but definitely that. And apprenticeships, internships, those types of programs are a great way to get in wherever you are. Start early. But Omar, same thing for you. How would you recommend people get into the space?
Yeah, so first, if you're interested in solar, community-based solar, go to our website, www.sunwealth.com. We have jobs posted all the time, mostly for recent graduates. We do some internships, but they would be through kind of Mass CEC. What Tamika said, for the most part, I 100% agree with. One thing with solar is a little bit different. Is it's not just I want to get into solar. It's probably like what kind of solar you want to get into, because solar is somewhat more flexible in where it's placed, how it's placed. Different companies do different things. like we're very kind of community focused, kind of environmental justice focused. And there's some other companies like that, like Posigen's another one. There are other companies, other solar companies, and a ton of them that, build in giant fields. And, if that's what you're more interested in, then you should kind of look for that. But, you can look at like large scale solar, you can look at, community-based solar, you can look at residential solar and get an understanding of what, which kind of solar is most interesting to you. And I agree, like with any, whether this was solar or finance or anything, reach out. One thing you want to have, you want to develop a network. So there's communities that are already in place. Like if you're in Massachusetts, Boston area, maybe Greentown Labs, just getting kind of in a group that kind of thinks about renewables and kind of can put you in kind of flow of information to some degree. But there are other groups just like Tamika mentioned. And then you create your own network by kind of doing cold calls, sending emails. Go on LinkedIn. You see a company looks interesting, try to find someone that went to the same school as you or has something similar to you. Or if there's nothing like that, just send it anyway, right? And seem like you're interested in something that you saw about them in their background to try to hook them, right? I mean, it's a sales process. Skills, needed for these types of jobs. I mean, it's attention to detail for the stuff that we're doing. Especially if you're young, like your major is going to help a little bit. If you're an engineer, that definitely helps. If you have a quantitative major, that helps for a lot of these jobs. But it's really kind of hard work and attention to detail. You can kind of figure it out for the most part. Especially if you're talking about 20, 21, 22, 23, like that. So.
Cool. So let me follow up on that, and I'm going to start really jumping into the questions in the chat as well. So I see Tiffany, who dropped a question about, hey, what skills or experiences do you think new graduates, either undergraduate or graduate, need to help to get into this space? And so Omar, I think you were starting on this, but to me, it feels like the answer is it depends, because it depends on what you're doing. Because Tamika laid out some tech things, but she also laid out things in like planning and a lot of different areas. And even as I look at us on this panel, Omar is an attorney. Tamika has a PhD in education. I have an engineering and MBA background. So if you could both talk to that, but also talk about, I just talked about a bunch of degrees. I think there are a lot of positions in the space where do you even need a degree? Maybe. So that may be the second question. So I don't know, Omar, why don't you go and then Tamika?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and this is like any industry, the newer the industry, the less rigid it's going to be. There are things that can help you with, in solar for sure. I mean, if you have an engineering background, you're going to pick up on some of the concepts faster. If you have, a legal background, you might pick up on some of the contracts faster. But that doesn't mean that if you don't have it, you're not going to have the ability to learn it. And that's where, especially when talking about the junior levels, the more junior you are and kind of the newer the industry, the greater the breadth of potential, background that could apply. So I wouldn't limit yourselves. I would just, if something looks interesting to you, I'd apply, and then don't self-select yourself out of a situation. Let them tell you no, right? And keep reaching out, keep networking, you learn more. Because even if you have a background in a specific thing, you're still, as an individual, you're unique and you have certain strengths and weaknesses that won't be apparent just by your degree. So you need to know what the best fit is based on, information that you get and talk to people, get an understanding of what's out there and what could be a good fit given your own strengths.
Tamika?
Yeah, agreed. I would say, I see that Tiffany sent this question. I can see it. I would say really a skill is, we know that depending on what type of training you go through, you're going to come out with your certificate or your degree. But the soft skills are so important. Stay humble, stay open to learn, because that is a skill. Some people will say, well, I've already been to training. I've already have my degree. But if you don't have an open mind, then how are you going to have that team characteristic, right? And so a lot of it is soft skills, because someone can come in, as Omar said, and maybe not have that degree, but they're going to go and be trained, right? So I'm thinking of like a GE wind technician. They just come in, even though they've gone through, technician training, maybe at their school or whatever it is. When they go to GE, it's a total separate training. GE wants you just to be trained to, fix their blades. And so you have to make sure that you are open to learning and to be humble, because yeah, it's great that you have that skill, but can you work in team building? Because especially when you're out on the water, you're going to have to learn how to be in a team and how to follow directions. So I think that, the skill, it depends on what type of job, you're doing. If you want to learn how to dive, go be a diver so that you can, be part of the offshore wind industry. That's a skill. But also at the same time, you have to make sure that the soft skills are there, you're humble, and that you're willing to learn and willing to be trained, because, no one wants an employee that comes in thinking that they know it all and does not want to be a team player. We know, especially when you're entry level, there's a lot of things to be learned. So I would just say, one of those skills are just to have an open mind and just be able to soak up the learning that would be happening around you. And I think that helps so much when you have someone that comes in, and we know that you have a graduate degree. We know you're smart, but can you work in a team? Right. And maybe do some tasks that you thought you wouldn't have to do that the degree has afforded you. So.
So I'm going to ask a question, and I see there was a question in the chat. Maybe Omar, you could take it, given you're an attorney. Margot asked about some opportunities at the intersection of environment and law, and I know Tamika was talking about contracts, but even before that, and maybe I'll start with you, Tamika, like, what is the scope and scale of the jobs in this space? Like, how many wind jobs are we talking about, and how many solar install jobs are we talking about, Omar? And then we'll jump to Margot's question. So Tamika?
Sure. So, when I look at just one project in Connecticut, when we talk about jobs, we talk about job years, right? We don't necessarily put like a number. And I can say the number of job years for one project, because you have to think when you ask that question, Kerry, that the offshore wind blades, right? They can be in service from 20 years to 30 years, depending on which blade you're looking at. So when we're talking about, we're not just talking about full-time jobs, yes, but we're talking about indirect jobs. I think you talked about in the beginning, Kerry, what type of jobs are, could someone have, as far as when I talk about catering? I mean, I'm not joking when I say, maybe you have this dream after you get your degree, I want to like open my own catering business, right? So we're also talking indirect jobs. And when you look about like a project in Connecticut, I mean, the job years, it's over 2,000 job years, right? And so we're talking about, for one project, having to hire almost like, just baseline, like 1,000 people, right? So there is, and that's just one project. And so I think that when you look at over how many years, we're not just talking about, it's one and done. We're talking about over years. And that's the important thing, that, when we trying to get people into this industry will provide for your family, right? I think, Omar said that people make, $55 an hour, they come in and by the 18th month, they're there. The average wage, I mean, like the low wage, especially in the trades, it's like 75,000, So I think that when we talk about the jobs, the jobs are in the thousands. The job years are multiplied times that, because we're not just talking about a project that's alive for a year. We're talking between 20 and 30 years, depending on which blades that you are using in the offshore industry.
Great. No, that's great. And Omar, before you answer, going back to what, I think Tamika was talking about, she sort of alluded to it here. There are those phases. There's that development phase, the construction phase, and then the operation. So, development might be, 1, 2, 3, 4 years, whatever. As you get started, it takes longer. That period is probably going to get shorter as we do that more. Construction is sort of fixed depending on the sort of size of the project. So it might be a couple years or whatnot. But what Tamika just laid out is operations is like decades. And so that stuff is going to go on for a very long time. Omar, I'll hand it to you to talk a little bit about scope on solar, but also I would assume that most of the legal jobs are probably going to be more on the development side and that project, that earlier piece. But why don't you answer those? And then unfortunately, we're probably going to have to hand it back over to Alicia. I think this was just to give you a taste,
Yeah.
see if you're interested, but go ahead, Omar.
Yeah. So, we look at job years too. And for example, we're doing a lot smaller projects. So we've in total done like about 1,000 job years, but you could say it's the amount, there are hundreds of thousands of potential jobs in the country right now for like solar installers. Then you put a multiple on that when you're talking about job years and like how many hours and how what you can, what would that create? And so if solar is a little bit like the development cycle, let's depend on the size of projects. If you're talking about, not as large scale projects, the development cycle is a little short. Everything's a little bit more compressed. Instead of taking, 5 years or maybe even 10 for some projects, solar will, what we do is takes 3 months, but others like, targeting the 5 megawatt range can take like 2 years. So it just depends on what you're building. For the legal side, there's a lot. I mean, it's a ton of overlap. And the reason why, and not just contractually, because it's not just the business side of it, but we're a regulated business. And so you have to deal with kind of the regulations. I mean, the IRA, Inflation Reduction Act, just came out. Somebody has to read that and then distill it and understand what that means and translate that to a business. Then you kind of get in the contractual standpoint, and then there's tax law to take into consideration, and making sure that your structures that you're building from a finance standpoint actually, when they get audited, won't get, blown up and then everyone loses their money. So there's a ton of, legal aspects. If you're a lawyer, there isn't really much you're not going to do. I mean, right now, nothing's big enough to run across some antitrust, but, besides that, you have the tariffs. So there's some international trade component to it. I mean, there's a lot of legal issues that pop up with regards to renewables in general. So it's not, you wouldn't be pigeonholing yourself. I mean, even a business like us, like I said, we have 2 lawyers, but they're doing all kinds of stuff, from looking at public offerings to like, contracting with developers to looking at the regulations, so.
All right, so I feel like we should have put more time to this, because I feel like we're just getting going, but unfortunately we're gonna stop because I know we've got some housekeeping things that Alicia wants to do. But I want to thank Omar and Tamika for coming and joining me and talking about solar and offshore wind. Please join me in thanking them for coming out. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to you, Alicia, to close us out.
Great. Thank you so much, Tamika, Omar, and Kerry, and thank you all for coming. This isn't the end. We, want to continue having these sorts of conversations, and this was really a high-level overview of both solar and wind, but the goal is, if we get enough interest, we could have a more in-depth conversation just looking at solar and the different kind of career avenues and pathways into that, just looking at wind. So this is really just very broad overview. So next steps, we wanted to share a interest form. So this is for folks who are interested in, let me just make sure I have the right link in here. I believe that I do. For folks who are interested in, telling us a little bit about yourself so that we can understand where your interests lie. Are you currently a student? Are you, postgraduate, where are you and what are you interested in getting connected to, whether it's internships, whether it's full-time job opportunities. As Kerry mentioned, we at BGS are looking to launch a job board and a learning community in the spring. So it's good for us to kind of understand where folks are coming from, and also, where are you living? Is this, we're primarily in kind of the Massachusetts, New England, Northeast region, but potentially could, expand beyond that. So it's good to know where you're coming from and where your interests lie. So that's the form there. So please fill it out, and we'll, send you information about opportunities that come up and potentially other events like this. We are having another Clean Energy Careers event on February 7th from 12 to 1. So I will share that as well in the chat. If you, it's live right now if you feel like registering for it. It's going to be focused more on kind of buildings, housing, decarbonization, as well as electric vehicles and potentially microgrids, storage, but that's kind of a lot to cover. So it might change as we lock in speakers to that, but it's generally going to cover the built environment and electric vehicles. And then to learn more about us, you can visit our website, browningthegreenspace.org. And if you want to sign up for our newsletter, if you scroll down, you'll see a link to subscribe to our newsletter. And you can always email me. That's my email there. And then follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter. That's a great way to kind of stay up to date on what's happening with BGS and events, opportunities. And I'll share the Twitter link as well. So lots of different ways to get in touch with us, sign up for, opportunities to learn more, and yeah, just reach out. We definitely, we're in this space where we're trying to connect people to opportunities and information and programs. So please reach out. Thank you so much for joining us on this call. We are recording it, and so we will be sending it out to everyone who registered for this event, as well as probably sharing it on our platform. So if you joined the event partway in, don't worry, you can go back and watch the beginning so that you don't miss anything. So thank you so much. And hopefully we'll see you on February 7th, if not sooner. Take care, everyone.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Alicia.